Hey, it's Professor Grabowski, and in this video I want to briefly discuss what's known as Section 230. Among the most pressing issues in the digital age is the regulation of online speech. What should be the limits of free speech, and who decides? The internet has become our modern-day public square. People use social media to get news and to debate politics. We take classes on Zoom, socialize on messaging apps, and find dates on apps like Tinder. So most people say they support free speech, so that people can express themselves freely online. On the other hand, the internet can also be a source of problematic speech, such as cyberbullying, hate speech, and misinformation. And many people believe there should be limits to free speech, so they support cracking down on bad speech. But who gets to decide which speech is bad and which speech is okay? Well, right now in the United States, a handful of platforms, such as Facebook, Twitter, and Google, get to decide. These three companies basically have a monopoly over the infrastructure that Americans use to express themselves online. Nearly 70% of US adults use Facebook. Twitter now has more than 300 million users and plays a critical gatekeeper and distribution role in news. Google has 90% of total US search engine market share, and its corporate sibling YouTube is similarly dominant in video. And when startups have attempted to compete against these giants, these companies have either bought them out or engaged in anti-competitive practices to hinder their success. This situation doesn't sit well with most Americans, regardless of whether they are liberal or conservative. Many people view Facebook and Google as out-of-control monopolies, and they wonder, why should a few people like Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey get to be the arbiter of free speech? No one voted for them. Well, there are two major reasons why this is the case. Number one is the First Amendment. The First Amendment in the United States Constitution prohibits the government from making laws that restrict free speech, with a few exceptions. Since Facebook, Twitter, and Google are private companies, the government can't control the content on their platforms. However, as I mentioned, there are exceptions to the First Amendment. While the First Amendment does protect all kinds of speech, including offensive speech and hate speech, it does not protect everything. It does not protect threats of violence, for example. It also does not protect copyright infringement. And it does not protect defamation, which is publishing information that you know is a lie and seriously damages a person's reputation. So theoretically, social media platforms could be vicariously liable for all that bad speech that their users post. But they're not, and here's why. In 1996, right as the internet was starting to become commercialized and go mainstream, Congress passed a law shielding websites and app operators from liability for the content users post on their platforms. The law also allows operators to moderate content in good faith without incurring any liability. In other words, social media networks like Facebook, information resources like Wikipedia, and search engines like Google can't be sued because of what their users say or do on their sites. And courts have dismissed many lawsuits seeking to hold these companies liable for their users' activities. So in short, online platforms can moderate content as they see fit and avoid any legal repercussions. Now, at the time the law passed, it seemed like a good idea. Sites like Facebook wouldn't be able to exist if they had to review every single post a user made before it was published to ensure that the post wasn't threatening or defamatory. And sites like YouTube wouldn't be possible if they had to look at every single video before it was uploaded to ensure it didn't violate copyright law. So Section 230 has basically enabled the internet as we know it. Without it, most of the websites and apps you use would not be able to exist. However, almost no one is happy with the way social media platforms moderate content on their sites. Some critics believe that social media sites don't do enough to limit disinformation and hate speech. In fact, a whistleblower recently revealed that Facebook knows its content can be harmful to people, but doesn't care. They simply care about getting clicks. On the other hand, other critics contend that terms like disinformation and hate speech have been abused and misused to unfairly censor dissident political viewpoints. And there have been cases where social media platforms have censored news stories that were factually true. So both sides have valid concerns about online speech. Lawmakers have started to take action. President Biden, for example, campaigned on repealing Section 230 and has recently pressured social media companies to censor certain users whom he accuses of spreading misinformation about COVID-19. Some experts see this as a violation of the First Amendment, since the government is using social media companies as a proxy for censorship. Meanwhile, state legislatures in conservative states such as Florida and Texas have passed laws prohibiting social media platforms from engaging in certain censorship practices. And some experts also see this as a First Amendment violation, since the government is essentially compelling social media sites to allow certain speech. It also remains to be seen if courts will allow any of these policies to stand. They will certainly be challenged in court. Now, I'm not sure how this will all play out. Congress seems so divided that I am skeptical they'll be able to agree on a compromise. Perhaps the Supreme Court will weigh in on one of the many lawsuits involving social media speech, but I wouldn't hold my breath, as they've been reluctant to address this issue. The only thing I'm confident about is that regulation of online speech is going to continue to be a major issue going forward. I think we're probably going to see increasing censorship, whether it's done by the government or by the social media companies themselves. And some people will welcome that censorship and see it as promoting a healthier society, whereas others may strongly oppose it and see it as undermining free speech and even democracy. So stay tuned. Once again, this has been Professor Mark Grabowski. Thanks for watching.